And he summarizes Buddhism, and not just him, others say the same, that Buddhism can be summarized into two. The view of dependent arising and the conduct of compassion, the behavior of compassion. Sometimes it's called non-violence. But non-violence can mean just refraining from harm, or in a greater sense, benefiting others. Having compassion, wanting to benefit others to remove their suffering. So therefore, Buddhism can be basically summarized into those two. The view, the philosophy, if you like, of dependent arising, and the conduct, the behavior, the enactment of compassion, of love towards others, towards oneself and others. Okay. All right. And then, so this speaks briefly about comparing religions. Of course, there are other religions other than Buddhism. And Holiness always speaks about the importance of respect for other religions. Very important to have respect for any religious system there is, as long as the system doesn't harm others. Right? I mean, I'm not talking about people who use Buddhism. In the name of Buddhism, they engage in atrocities. In the name of Christianity, in the name of Judaism, in the name of Islam, they engage in atrocities. We cannot blame the religion when people use it wrongly, right? It's a little bit like blaming a car for someone who can't drive a car. Oh, that's the car's fault. That was an accident. That is the stupid Peugeot that right? It's like the driver. We have to, if the driver can't drive it properly, well, that's the problem. We can't blame the medicine if someone gets prescribed the medicine by a doctor and and the doctor prescribes it wrongly. Gives the wrong medicine. Can't blame the medicine for it. So therefore, from a Buddhist point of view, if we look at the religions, they're kind of philosophy, and we don't need to study them, but just superficially, if you look at like what they propound, it's usually working for others, being kind, being altruistic, being generous, living a moral life. Don't do to others that you don't want others to do to yourself, for example. Other details and so forth that we may not agree with, and they may be a little bit harder, but basically the main message is that. Okay. So therefore, to have respect for all religions, and that's something, if you haven't heard this yet, but His Holiness always talks about, you cannot say one religion is better than another. This is the idea of dependent arising, actually. How? Dependent arising. How does that connect? How does the idea that there's no religion that is the best religion connect to dependent arising? Does anyone know?
It's not the answer. Are you talking about Buddhism as a philosophy or as a religion? Because you all the time compare Buddhism to other religions.
Well, religion, it just depends how you define religion, of course. Religion, I believe, is a system. It's a system that, by way of implying, by way of practicing this system, the point of it is to find more happiness. Maybe you could define it in that way. A system that includes faith, that includes a philosophy, that includes possibly rituals and so forth. So maybe you could call that a religion. So if you say religion means a system where there's a creator God, Buddhism does not qualify to be a religion. It doesn't accept a creator in the same way as the Abrahamic faith do. But when I say religion, I mean a system that one doesn't just learn about, like a philosophy, but that one also applies. Right? So if one takes Buddhism as a religion, then philosophy, usually, a philosophy, just taking something as a philosophy is for the sake of just thinking about it, knowing about it, reflecting upon it, not to apply it to one's own life. I don't think that's the idea of philosophy. Right? So when you take it as a religion, it means you don't just take the philosophy, you also apply bits of it. And that doesn't mean you're a Buddhist, it just means you take it in a practical way. So in that sense, I think all the religions are, you can't say that one religion is better than others. Why? Because it is, yes.
Maybe because there are different ways for different people to reach the same goal. So each one is good for a different person.
Yes. So how does that have to do with dependent arising?
merely imputed.
No, it's relative.
It's relative.
It's relative. So being good or bad, it's like there's nothing really you can't say it's good just in itself. It's good in the relation to independence on a certain person. So Judaism is the best religion for someone who has that psychological makeup, for whom this system allows them to live a moral life and attain their goal. So for them, that's the best religion. I would say, I don't know, for that person. So it just depends on the person. In other words, as His Holiness says, religion is it's like a medicine. Okay? It depends. I mean, if you practice it correctly in the way it's supposed to be practiced, then it becomes a medicine, as in that it allows a person to live a more moral life and a happier life, possibly more fulfilled life. So any religion, there's no religion we can say is the best, because it's totally relative. Okay? So Buddhism is not the best religion. Christianity is not the best religion. Judaism is not the best. It just depends on the person. Like medicine. It's like saying medicine against a headache is the best medicine. Well, it depends if you have a headache, right? Or medicine against, I don't know, tuberculosis. That's only the best medicine if you have got tuberculosis. So, therefore, that's the reason for why His Holiness talks about respect for other religions. It's important to have respect. I mean, to have respect for the people who practice it. So oftentimes in Buddhism you find there are debates when different followers of Buddhism or of Hinduism, at the time when Buddhism was very widely practiced in India, there were a lot of debates going on between the different systems, and that wasn't seen as good, to reflect, to debate, but debate in a respectful way. You had respect for the person who was practicing a certain system. There was definitely respect there. But then you wouldn't have to agree. We don't have to agree with it. Personally, if someone follows the Buddhist system or the Christian, Jewish system, you can have respect for another tradition, but you don't have to follow it. So His Holiness talks about the difference between having faith in something and having respect for something. We don't have to have faith. Faith also doesn't mean necessarily, there are 3 types of faith, which I'll speak about a little later, but there's faith which is believe in something, believing it makes sense, that's the kind of faith. Then there's faith, like a joyful faith, like when you encounter a person who's like, for example, very inspiring, when you see them there's joy, it's called joyful faith. And there's a 3rd type of faith, which is aspiration, you yourself want to do something, it's also a type of faith. So you can have faith, and I'll go through them again later, but you can have faith in, for example, Judaism, and you have respect for all the other religions. So you believe in what Judaism tells you, you have belief, it makes you joyful to see an inspiring rabbi, and you want to become like him or her. Okay? So that would be having faith in Judaism, but respect for all the other traditions, Islam, Christianity, and so forth, because the ideas behind those systems are actually very beautiful. Don't look at the people who practice them. If they don't practice them properly, okay, that's not the problem of the religion, that's the problem of the people. So anyway, His Holiness just talks about that, and I think especially in the 21st century, that is so important. I mean, in India this is very important. You have so many religions coming together, and there are many times problems between Hindus and Muslims, between Sikhs and Hindus, between Christians and Hindus and Muslims. I mean, there's many times in different areas there are conflicts. There are conflicts between Buddhists and Muslims, for example, in Myanmar, or as it's called, Burma. Yeah, there have been conflicts just very recently. So this is a sign of not respecting one another. Okay, very important. In Israel, of course, too, being the Holy Land, so many, at least 3 main religions being dominant here, so to have respect for one another. Okay, so this is just something mentioned in the 2nd chapter, which is called, let me just look at the title, Comparing Religions, comparing these systems, and as she mentioned, Buddhism as a philosophy and Buddhism as, what's your name? Sorry, I don't want to say she.
Netta.
Netta, you told me before, now I remember. Sorry. Netta. So, as Netta just said, yeah, so Buddhism, what is it as a philosophy? Actually, Buddhism, and this is also something that comes up later, but never mind, I might as well mention it here. Buddhism talks of, there are three categories, three kind of subdivisions of Buddhism as a whole. There is a scientific part, there's a philosophical part, and there is a religious part. So science, philosophy, and religion. So what does that mean? Science just means the way in which Buddhism explains reality, right? Like science as in like wanting to know, or like knowledge, referring to knowledge. So knowledge of what phenomena really are. Philosophy means then to understand the part that understands that science, that understand how phenomena really are, in a way in which one debates, one analyzes, one takes all sorts of reasonings. So that's the philosophical part, right? Science is just, for example, you could say that there's a text by Vasubandhu called the Abhidharma Kosha. Sometimes it's called phenomenology. It just kind of lays out how phenomena exist. Doesn't really give reasons. Okay? This is this, there are these divisions. This is like consciousness can be divided into this and this category. There are afflictive emotions, and it just kind of mentions all those. That's kind of the science. And then there's the philosophy, where these texts that go into all details. So what is consciousness? What does that mean? Why is a consciousness afflicted and another one isn't? So all the reasonings, the kind of the kind of examination, the analysis to really get a deeper understanding. And the religious part is the part that one actually takes it on. One applies this to one's own life. If one comes to see, oh, okay, so there is, for example, anger. Okay, first in the scientific part of Buddhism, anger is explained. What is anger? What's wrong with